From pavement to concrete. The street doesn't announce when it's done with you. It doesn't give warnings. It doesn't send signs. One day, it simply stops protecting you. Before the prison walls. Before the sentence. Before the number replaces your name. There is always a beginning. The street that raised him. The block had no official name. People just called it the Cut, a stretch of cracked pavement wedged between abandoned storefronts and low brick housing that the city forgot how to maintain. Streetlights worked when they felt like it. Sirens passed often enough that nobody looked up anymore. That's where he learned timing. Not the kind taught in school, but the kind that keeps you alive. When to move. When to stay quiet. When to disappear into a crowd that didn't care if you existed. He wasn't born violent. That's the lie people tell to make the ending easier. He learned violence the same way others learn language, by immersion. Hunger is a teacher. His earliest memories weren't faces. They were sensations. The weight in his stomach that never went away. The sound of arguing behind thin walls. The feeling of watching other people have options. By the time he was old enough to understand money, he already knew he wouldn't get much of it the clean way. School taught rules that didn't apply outside the classroom. On the street, rules were enforced immediately. Break one, and consequences arrived fast and personal. That efficiency made sense to him. First line crossed. The first job wasn't planned. Nothing dramatic. Nothing cinematic. Just being in the wrong place with the right kind of desperation. A lookout position. 10 minutes. No talking. He earned more in that short window than his household saw in weeks. That's how it starts. Not with ambition. With relief. Learning the code. The people who noticed him didn't speak much. They didn't need to. They watched posture. Reaction time. Whether fear made you freeze or sharpen. He learned the unspoken code quickly. Don't ask questions. Don't brag. Don't get emotional. Emotion was expensive. The street rewarded calm, even when chaos surrounded you. Especially then. Becoming useful. Usefulness buys safety. He learned routes before others did. Learned who talked too much. Learned which corners were watched and which were ignored. He wasn't loud. He wasn't flashy. That made him valuable. The louder ones burned out early. Jail. Hospital. Cemetery. Quiet people lasted longer. The shift. There's always a moment when the work changes. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Just enough that you notice your reflection differently. It happened after a deal went sideways, not violently, just badly. Someone panicked. Someone else ran. He stayed. Cleaned up. Redirected. Smoothed the damage. That's when responsibility finds you. Not because you want it. Because you survived something others didn't. Reputation without a name. On the street, names are currency. But real power doesn't need them. People didn't call him anything consistent. They just nodded when he showed up. Made space. Adjusted plans. That's when he stopped being replaceable. And that's when the risks multiplied. Money changes the shape of time. Money didn't make him happy. It made him patient. Bills stopped screaming. Hunger softened. Problems became solvable with speed instead of panic. But money also slows you down mentally. You start thinking in longer arcs. Bigger moves. Permanent outcomes. That's dangerous. Because the street doesn't think long term. It reacts. The first mistake. The mistake wasn't arrogance. It was loyalty. He vouched for someone who hadn't earned it yet. Someone hungry in the wrong way. The kind of hunger that rushes. That one decision pulled attention they didn't need. Cars lingered longer. Faces repeated. Questions came sideways instead of straight. The street was shifting. Pressure builds quietly. Law enforcement didn't arrive with sirens. They arrived with patience. Surveillance that didn't announce itself. Patterns that didn't confront him directly. The pressure felt like air thickening. He adjusted. Cut contact. Reduced movement. But the net doesn't tighten evenly. It waits. The arrest. It didn't happen during a deal. It happened on an ordinary morning. That's how it usually goes. No music. No build-up. Just hands where they shouldn't be and a voice that already knows your name. The street doesn't warn you when it's done. The ride. The ride to processing is where reality lands. Not the arrest itself. The silence afterward. The understanding that whatever you were managing out there no longer matters. Someone else fills the space immediately. You're already replaced. Stripped of context. Processing removes more than possessions. It removes identity. Clothes go first. Then personal items. Then the way people look at you. You become a case number. A category. A problem being transferred. The efficiency is unsettling. First night inside. The first night is the longest. Every sound feels intentional. Every movement feels watched. You realize quickly that prison is not violent all the time. It's controlled all the time. That difference matters. Learning new rules. Prison has rules written down and rules that circulate quietly. The written ones don't matter as much. He observed before acting. Watched where people stood. Who ate fast. Who never sat with their back exposed. The street taught survival. Prison taught restraint. The weight of time. Days in prison don't move forward. They stack. Meals divide time instead of clocks. Sleep comes when it can. Noise never fully leaves. He counted weeks, then stopped. Counting hurts. Reputation follows you in. You don't enter prison blank. Stories arrive before you do. Half true. Half invented. Some people test you to confirm them. Others avoid you to stay safe. You don't correct stories in prison. You let them exist. The incident. Every sentence has a moment that defines it. Not always violent. Sometimes strategic. He intervened once, only once, to stop something escalating. Not for heroism. For containment. That moment locked his status. Not dominant. Not weak. Predictable. That's valuable inside. The transfer. Transfers are worse than sentencing. Sentencing gives you numbers. Transfers give you uncertainty. When his name was called, no explanation followed. Just paperwork. Just movement. Movement without context is never good. Arrival at the new facility. This prison felt different. Quieter. More rigid. Less human. The walls absorbed sound. Guards spoke less. He understood immediately, this place was built to manage people like him. Not to house them. Control without chaos. No shouting tears. No visible disorder. Just systems layered on systems. Schedules. Counts. Doors that moved only when allowed. This wasn't punishment. It was containment. The first real thought of escape. The idea didn't come as a plan. It came as a realization. Nothing here is designed for release. Not reform. Not progression. Not return. Just maintenance. And for the first time since the street, he felt something unfamiliar. Not fear. The space between walls. The second prison did not announce itself with noise. It announced itself with absence. Absence of chatter. Absence of color. Absence of time markers that meant anything. Where the first facility felt crowded with personalities, this one felt engineered to erase them. Here, silence wasn't the result of discipline. It was the goal. Learning the shape of stillness. The first weeks were not violent. That was the trick. No confrontations. No obvious threats. Just rules layered so tightly that choice vanished without anyone needing to raise a voice. Doors moved when they were told. Lights obeyed schedules that never changed. Movement followed patterns that left no room for improvisation. Improvisation was what kept him alive on the street. Here, improvisation was a liability. So he stopped. When the mind turns inward, days became indistinguishable. Meals arrived with the same rhythm. Counts happened with the same cadence. Sleep came in fragments, never fully deep. When there's nothing to react to, the mind starts reacting to itself. Memories surfaced uninvited. Old streets replayed without sound. Faces blurred into impressions. At first, he tried to push the thoughts away. That didn't work. So he learned to let them pass. The discipline of waiting. The street taught speed. Prison taught patience. This place taught waiting without expectation. Waiting without a goal is different from waiting with one. It stretches time until it feels thick, almost solid. He began breaking days into smaller units, not hours, but moments. The sound of a door. The shift of light. The end of a meal. Anything measurable. Anything finite. A different kind of fear. Fear here wasn't sudden. It didn't spike. It settled. The fear wasn't of harm. It was of stagnation, of realizing that nothing ahead would ever change unless something broke the pattern. And patterns here were sacred. They were guarded more carefully than walls. Conversations without words. Actual conversation was rare. But communication found other forms. A glance held a fraction longer than necessary. A pause where there shouldn't be one. A shift in posture during routine movement. Nothing that could be pointed to. Nothing that could be proven. Just acknowledgement. Others were here for the same reason. Not because of what they'd done, but because of what the system believed they would always be. The weight of finality. In the first prison, sentences had numbers. Here, numbers lost meaning. Transfer paperwork didn't list milestones. Reviews didn't promise outcomes. Compliance didn't guarantee progression. The system didn't threaten. It simply existed. And that existence was permanent. When thought becomes resistance, the idea didn't arrive as a plan. It arrived as a refusal. A refusal to accept that the rest of life would be measured only by routines imposed from the outside. Not a blueprint. Not a scheme. Just a line drawn internally. Acceptance would have been easier. That's what the place was designed for. Testing the boundary, without crossing it, he didn't rush. Rushing is how people disappear in here. Instead, he observed, not structures, not schedules, but responses. How the system reacted to small deviations. How it corrected behavior. How it reasserted control. Every system has a tolerance, even when it pretends it doesn't. Understanding tolerance is different from exploiting it. He wasn't exploiting anything. He was learning where thought could exist without punishment. Pressure without violence. The pressure increased subtly. Not through threats, but through attention. Extra checks. Longer pauses at doors. Neutral questions asked more than once. Attention in prison is never neutral. But attention also means visibility. Visibility can be protection. The moment that changed everything. The moment wasn't dramatic. No alarms. No confrontation. Just paperwork handed through a slot, then withdrawn. A delay where there shouldn't have been one. A procedural error corrected too quickly. The system revealed itself for a split second. Not weak. Just human. And human systems, no matter how rigid, have seams. The decisions don't always come with certainty. Sometimes they come with exhaustion. He understood the cost immediately. This wouldn't end the story. It would only change its shape. There would be no victory. Only consequences. But permanence had consequences too. And those were already being paid daily. The night before there is always a night before, even if it feels like every night. Sleep didn't come. Not from nerves, from clarity. This was not about beating the system. It was about stepping outside it long enough to reclaim authorship over the next chapter, however brief. That mattered. When movement finally happens, movement in this place was ritualized. So when movement happened differently, even slightly, it felt unreal. Time stretched. Sound sharpened. Thought narrowed to presence. There was no room for imagination anymore. Only action measured in heartbeats. The escape, as it was experienced, later, people would argue about how it happened. They always do. But from the inside, it didn't feel like a sequence of clever maneuvers. It felt like endurance. Endurance of uncertainty. Endurance of fear. Endurance of the knowledge that turning back was no longer an option. There were no triumphs. Only forward motion. The first breath outside freedom doesn't feel like movies promise. There's no music. No relief. Just an overwhelming sensory flood. Air feels louder. Space feels unstable. The absence of walls feels suspicious. The body doesn't trust it. The chase that never ends escaping custody does not end pursuit. It begins it. He knew that before he took the first step beyond confinement. Freedom without anonymity is temporary. And anonymity is fragile. Every interaction becomes a calculation. Every decision carries weight. The world hasn't changed. Only your position in it has. Living in the margins, days blurred again, but differently. Movement replaced stillness. Risk replaced routine. Sleep came in shallow waves. Trust was non-existent. The street had moved on. The cut looked smaller now. Time had not waited. Consequences catch up quietly. Consequences don't always arrive with sirens. Sometimes they arrive as limits. Places you can't go. People you can't see. Versions of yourself you can't access anymore. Freedom narrowed until it felt almost theoretical. Reflection without regret. Regret implies a belief that another choice would have led somewhere better. He wasn't sure that was true. The escape didn't erase the past. It didn't promise a future. But it broke a sentence that was designed to be unbreakable, even if only briefly. That mattered. The meaning of escape isn't about distance. It's about agency. For a time, however short, he reclaimed it. That reclamation carried a cost. But so did submission. The ending that isn't clean. Stories like this don't end cleanly. They taper. They fracture. They become footnotes and rumors and warnings told secondhand. What matters isn't whether the escape lasted. What matters is what it proved. That even the most controlled systems cannot fully erase human will. They can suppress it. They can punish it. But they can't design it out completely. Final reflection. The street shaped him. Prison refined him. Escape revealed him. Not as a hero. Not as a lesson. But as a reminder that control, no matter how total it appears, is never absolute. And that the space between walls, physical or psychological, is where stories like this are born.